And here in the studio is a lawyer and public affairs analyst, Jide Ologun. Jide, good morning.
Good morning.
It's nice to have you join us.
Thank you.
Now, the occurrence of the dethronement and the deposement of an emir is not something that happens often. And when it happens, on one hand, it's historic. On the other hand, it's quite strange because it's not a regular occurrence, in as much as the law provides for it, just in case it happens. But I know you've been following this development since yesterday. What has been your reaction to things?
I think we agree that the only thing that is constant is change. And like you rightly mentioned, in 1963, his grandfather was dethroned, Muhammadu Sanusi I. And I recall also that in 1996, the Sultan of Sokoto then, Dasuki, was dethroned by the former military head of state, Abacha. And here we are now. We have that of the former Emir of Kano, Muhammadu Sanusi. His own case is peculiar. If you consider the allegations against him, that he's disrespectful to constituted authority, he sometimes doesn't show up for public functions, and that he's been challenging the culture, the traditions. And let's look at the aspect of tradition. For those of us who have been monitoring him, you know he's been quite vocal. In fact, recently he disclosed that there was no reason to be happy in the northern part of the country, given the banditry, the Almanjiri system, and different kinds of crime going on. And he said that at the birthday of one of the governors. And talking about him and the governor of Kano State, Ganduje, they've not been friends. He's perceived to be supporting opposition, and he has been an advocate of, let us stop building mosques, let's begin to develop the people. He's been outspoken, and of course...
apologies, Mr. Ologun, but then we also saw the governor saying, through the council that did the act yesterday, saying the emir exists at the pleasure of the sitting governor. Is that a healthy norm, as it should be?
It's not healthy. That applies in all the states. The governor hands over the staff of office to the king. So you can say that the king is at the mercy of the governor, but because there is no constitutional role for the king, they are to just be intermediaries between the people and the government to ensure that the spirit of governance is delivered upon, ensure tranquility, peace, prosperity in the land. And that is why the president said in Maiduguri that the traditional leaders can help in fighting Boko Haram. And having said that, recall also that recently the governor created additional emirates in Kano to further decimate the power concentrated in the unitary emirate. And the Kano emirate came into being in 1805, following the conquest of Madame Fodio, all right? And after the British colonialists left, there has been attempts to water down the influence of that office. And here we are now. And now that we have a new emir, it's likely that the governor may now proceed to create the additional emirate, dividing the centralized emirate of Kano. But my concern is that I'm waiting to see how this will reintroduce prosperity to Kano.
All right, Jide Ologun, this discussion is going to continue.
Well, lawyer and public affairs analyst Jide Ologun is live with us now in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Ologun. Thank you very much for joining us at this time. So a lot has been said since the news broke about Emir Sanusi's being deposed, so to speak. Looking at the legacy the man leaves behind, how would you describe it?
I think for the kind of person he is, like we heard, he's been in the eyes of the storm. So for him, he has delivered the message. So it's now for us to run with the message. And for characters like this, they constitute what we call catalyst in any society. You recall that it was not the man that had a dream in America that became the first black to occupy the White House, and demystifying the fact that the White House is not strictly for the white. So he has raised issues. issues of educating, developing the people, economic benefits for the people. So it's now left for the larger society to look at their culture, religion, and tradition and ask the big question, should it be developmental or regressive? So, and obviously, the governor has the constitutional power to manage the affairs of the king, and he has exercised that power, but the issues are still with us in the society. So how do we deal with these issues? So he has played his own part. He's not the first king to be dethroned, and I think for him it may be like a sad occasion, but knowing who he is as an individual, I think he would rather have a greater peace by speaking out and being humiliated, in quotes, than to keep quiet and watch the society dwindle into what may become a serious chaos in the future. Because if you monitor where we are now as a people, the critical elements he is prompting requires our urgent attention.
All right. Now, there were some public statements he made, very powerful statements, that some people feel resonated, touched on the everyday lives that Nigerians complain about, like speaking truth to power, letting them know these are some of the issues that need to be changed. In the same vein, those statements, a lot of others feel wouldn't go down well with some of the powers that be within the feudal system. But how do those statements resonate with you, especially when he's talking about poverty in the north, he's talking about out-of-school children, he's talking about equality for girls, girl-child, equality for women, and all of that?
I've asked the question. There's what we call returns on investment. The first lady of this country came out to tell us about the deplorable state of the Aso Villa Clinic. And our president went to the UK for treatment. Is that a reality or not? It's a reality. So what is the state of that clinic today? She also spoke about our country spending about $16 million on buying mosquito nets. And she said that money was enough to fumigate the whole of Nigeria. Do we still have a vibrant social intervention in Nigeria? The answer is no, and that's why some of us are concerned. As we speak now, I'm waiting to see how, after this dethronement, the governor will sit back with his team and say, can we now begin to educate our children? Can we now begin to develop the environment? Don't forget that Kano was one of the most prominent business communities in Africa. So are we progressing or regressing? These are issues. We cannot run away from it. This is a local experience, but we're in a global community. Right now, we have the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations that will be evaluated in year 2030. So where will we be in 2030? And it's been projected that by year 2050, we are likely to have double of our present population. So while we are the Emir has been sent away, those issues must concern the government.
But let me also,
it's very critical.
Let me also ask this question about, at least 2 lawsuits now were being instituted against the former emir now. Of course, he stands innocent until proven otherwise, but then the man has been sent to exile. So is this really rather obvious? The cases are as good as that. But then there were cogent, there were alleged issues now, talking about, corrupt land deals and other allegations.
We have the presumption of innocence concept under our constitution. So the prosecutor will have to prove that case. But if I use the case of Onohen as a test case here, you realize that as soon as Onohen was successfully removed from office, there came a soft landing for him in respect of the allegations. And that is the interference of politics. So, but that has not taken away the issues we must address. So some of us may expect that now that he's been dethroned, then some people will come in and say, okay, this is enough for this guy, except the government really wants to go down and deal with him. But then you must prove in the court that those criminal allegations, that he really committed them. And this is a signal to all, and there are several schools of thought. Some are asking, will those who can speak the truth to the government will now be intimidated? And my answer to that is no, because when you keep quiet, your destiny is threatened. It was a series of engagement that led us to having our political independence. So Nigeria must develop, we must maximize our resources, we must have a vibrant human capital. So I'm still advising that while some may be celebrating the dethronement of the king, can we come together and see how Nigeria can join the developed and civilized communities of the world?
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Jide Ologun, for your contributions.
Nigeria.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Lawyer and public affairs analyst Jide Ologun is here with us to give us perspectives to this issue. Jide, it's nice to have you join us right now.
Thank you.
Now, when the king is deposed, from what we understand, the rule says he's going to be almost close to a house arrest, and his movement will be curtailed, will be restricted, and will not have access to the media, will not have access to the kind of visitors and all of that. Now, if he has been removed, constitutionally, he's now close to a commoner. Wouldn't the constitution guarantees freedom of movement and a lot of freedoms? Wouldn't that apply in this case?
You know, by and large, I think this is more of a traditional and cultural issue.
Okay.
So you may not expect the fundamental human rights that we make reference to. And there had been instances in the past. And in fact, in some societies, they are banished completely out of human community, but that is not the case here. But we have listened to the former emir in his humbled position, but I still admire his courage. He's still asking for good leadership, because the issues he has raised while in office as the emir are still with us. So, and like I mentioned earlier, I want to see a big question on the table of governance now. What next? That Muhammadu Sanusi is out as the Emir of Kano. In 5 years' time, will Kano pick up and become more prosperous? In 7 years'
As
time,
it used to be,
will we have less number of children out of school on the street? In 10 years' time, we will, have total absence of beggars on the street. So there are issues of governance, good governance, that should be a matter of concern. And again, we also need to look at the relationship between the two institutions, the government institution, so powerful, and the traditional institution that should collaborate.
which is also powerful in its own respect.
Exactly. But now you can see, they say when
they clash.
When two metals clash, one must bend. So these are evolving issues.
Yeah, but then do you think that Nigeria is ready for that now? Talking about this issue of removing traditional rulers from the influence of political leaders, so to speak. Is Nigeria ready?
Not
ready
exactly.
for that?
Even those in government. I made reference to the visit of the president to Borno State during a recent attack by the insurgents. He actually said that the traditional rulers have a great role to play in ensuring that we fight insurgency. So they are a critical, they are beyond those you call opinion leaders. They are major stakeholders in public relations, and when you talk about stakeholders management. But then what we have seen now is that perhaps they should be on the same page. Even when you have dissenting position, there's a way of expressing it. Let me give an instance. You recall that in Oyo State, former Governor Ajimobi also tried to shake the table of the traditional institutions. But you look at Cross River State with Professor Benayade. It's not, if you have studied him, in a way, he's been on the same page. In fact, towards 2019 election, the Council of Kings came together and endorsed him. So there is a need for synergy between the institutions that regulate the society. But having said that, the person of the former Emir of Kano is not that kind of a person, whether he's in the corporate world, the government circle, or traditional circle. And from his last expression of still demanding for good leadership, I doubt if he has changed so much. history marching on, but I want to see a future where we can look back and claim to have made dividends of good governance from this experience. But it has come, and I think he has admitted that he ascribed it to the super godly influence.
Absolutely.
So we wish him the best in the future endeavors.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jide Ologun, for your time and perspectives on this.
God bless Nigeria.
Indeed.